December 7th meeting of the Development Review Board to order. Welcome, everybody. If you are in the audience and you intend to provide any evidence or make any comments, please be sure that you sign in so that we can have a clear record of everybody who was here and testified. Thank you. So the first matter on our agenda is public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to make a public comment? I know we have some Boy Scouts, I think, in the audience this evening. Are you here because you're watching or you have an interest in the hearing?
We're taking notes for a communications verified.
Oh. Oh, good. Well, welcome. We will try not to bore you.
Oh, we probably will.
That's fairly
Welcome. I actually have a public comment. I wanted to just thank all the members of the board for the tough CHT decision and how that came together, and I just want to recognize how much time went into it. I think we had 5, if not 6 hearings. And it was, to me, remarkable how well it all came together in terms of deciding the case and thinking about it, even though we weren't unanimous in the decision. I just wanted to recognize everybody's effort, the amount of time and effort that went into that, so thank you. The next matter on our agenda is approval of 3 sets of minutes, October 19, November 2, and November 16, 2016. Does anybody have any changes to the minutes or comments? If not, I'd like to take a motion I would entertain a motion for approval of all 3 minutes.
Oh, I can't do that. I wasn't here all 3 times.
Okay. Anybody else? Was anyone?
I would make the
Mark
motion.
might have been.
And I'll second it.
here.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. The next matter on our application is for DR 16-12 and CU 1608. It's the application of Matthew Taylor for design review and conditional use approval for the modification of a non-conforming freestanding sign. The property is located at 102 Harbor Road in the Village Residential District and Village Design Review Overlay District. Is there anybody in the audience this evening present to testify about this application?
Hi, I'm Matthew's wife, and
If you would come forward, please, and state your name so the microphone will pick it up. And this is so that you may not know this, but we have a vast viewing audience. There's thousands of Shelburnites watching this evening.
this exciting Wednesday night. Yes, Brianne Taylor, Matthew Taylor's wife.
Okay. Tell us about, oh, yes. Thank you, Mark. Can you raise your right hand?
Yep.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may proceed.
Okay, so Matthew came up with a new sign design. The one that's out there has been there for a while. So we went to the Historic Review Board a couple weeks ago, showed them, they approved it. We've kind of been directed over to you folks now for a conditional use approval. My understanding it's because of the size, even though the new one is actually smaller in square feet than the existing one. The existing one's about 12 square feet, and this one's about 10 square feet. And there was, I guess, some confusion about where the sign's going to be on the existing signpost that's already out there, which is where it is. It got moved slightly when the sidewalk got put in. Apparently there's a right-of-way concern. However, when the sidewalk went in, the signpost actually moved closer to the building than it is now by maybe 2 or 3 feet or so.
Does anybody have any questions of the applicant from the board?
Well, actually, the only question I have is it actually going to be that color? Is that what it's going to look like?
It is going to be like a brushed aluminum metal color.
Oh, okay.
The blue, the printer doesn't kind of match exactly what the blue is going to be.
Okay.
It's going to be a deeper blue. It won't be that bright.
Because right now it's a black sign
black.
with gold lettering.
Yeah, this is the new logo that we have on our business cards and all of our marketing
Okay.
materials. So we're trying to kind of streamline all of that. And it is going to be like a plexiglass, the
Okay.
blue part, and then the aluminum on the outside. So
Okay, but like a shiny, silvery?
Yeah,
Okay,
yep.
yeah.
Lighting?
There's existing lighting, undermount lighting, there that we're gonna use the same lighting.
Any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, I would move to finalize the record for these two applications and close the hearing with an indication of approval with the notation that a sign shall be required prior to land development. What does that mean? Yeah, I was gonna say, it doesn't make sense. And so you'll need to get a permit before you install the sign.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I'll second that.
I have a second. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so the next matter on our agenda, which is actually scheduled for 7:20, and I want to recognize that members of the Natural Resources Committee are in meeting right now, and I assume will be coming in soon. But I do want to start because it's a very large application with a lot of people in the audience to hear, and I assume some people have questions. So I will take up SUB 1602. This is continued from our last meeting. It's reconsideration of sketch plan application by the Snyder Custom Homes Company. The revised plan includes 91 housing units, which consists of a mix of single-family carriage homes and townhouse units on 53 acres of land, well, to be precise, 53.5 acres of land and 24 acres of open space. The property is located at 0 Spear Street on the west side in the residential district, the stormwater overlay district, and the floodplain and watercourse overlay district. I assume that Mr. Snyder, you're here to testify. May, just by a show of hands, see who all is planning to testify. And let me be clear, there's a difference between just commenting and giving your opinion and testimony that would relate to questions that you, well, the evidence that you wish to give relative to the application and questions you might have of the applicant. So I want to try to draw that distinction for folks.
Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Sure. This is an application and it's an evidentiary hearing, the purpose of which is to take evidence about the application. It's not intended to be a forum for people to express their opinions about the application.
What about opinions of other testimony?
It's not a forum for opinions. This is a forum for evidence related to the application in taking into account the bylaws, the subdivision regulations, and the comprehensive town plan. Just try, you know, it's not a deal breaker if you give an opinion. It's just that there are a lot of people here. We're going to want to try to get through this application, and we want to take evidence about the application and factual concerns that you have about the application. It's not that big a distinction. So by a show of hands, who wishes to give evidence this evening about this application or ask questions of the applicant? Show of hands, please. Okay, not very many. Okay.
I don't know.
And I'm not going to hold you to it. Just trying to get a sense of how much time we have is really for timekeeping purposes more than anything else. More people may come in. Mary Ann?
Just make sure everybody signs in before they leave.
Yeah. If you haven't signed in, please be sure to sign in, Judy.
Mary, isn't it true that the only new documentation we have is from the Natural Resources and Conservation Committee?
Well, we have the, if I understand, if you take a look at the staff report, Kate lays out what the record is right here. I'm not going to tell you what's new or not, but it all looks pretty new except for the Water Commission letter, which I actually have some questions about. and the wildlife survey, but I think that all postdates.
We had the wildlife survey last time.
Yeah.
The only thing you haven't seen is the natural resources comments,
Yeah.
and actually, I have something from Chris that was submitted just a day late, and so you guys have to accept it as kind of a response to the natural resources comments. But, yeah.
So the reason why I'm asking that question is that we got held up the last time when we were waiting for the Natural Resources Committee. We thought they were gonna join us the last time we discussed this. Is there any way we could just communicate with them that we're running a little earlier than we thought and that maybe they could come sooner? Since this is a pretty major piece of new documentation.
I could peek my head in. They're right next door.
Yeah,
I'll be right back.
good point. It is an ongoing problem, I'll say that, with the committee meeting on the same evening that we meet.
Right.
And then they have applications that they,
Have to do themselves, right?
Yep.
I just thought that maybe if, I mean, last time we didn't communicate with them at all, and.
you mean, when you say last time, you mean for this, the September application?
Right, because
Yeah.
we knew that they were meeting and this is what they were discussing.
Right.
We thought they were gonna.
Right, and then we continued it again because we didn't have all the members.
Members,
that were
right.
here. So, all right, well, why don't we get started, and I'll invite the applicant to come to the microphone and give us a rundown, if
Right.
that's okay for
Real
everybody?
quick question.
Sure.
So I remember April, and I remember we did the denial thing. Did I miss anything during the summer?
What you missed is that we reconsidered and
Okay.
opened up.
Did they submit anything
Yeah,
during the
they-
summer?
They submitted a new application on September 13th, which is in
Okay,
your
which is
packet.
this
Yeah.
right here. Got
Yep.
it, okay,
Yeah, so I think you're good to go.
okay.
Do you want to take this?
Sure, it worked.
A little communication never hurts.
Sure.
Write that down, Boy Scouts.
Okay, so we're
We
being
have
handed.
some seats up here.
Yeah. We're being handed a letter to Caitlin from Chris?
And Andy.
From Chris Snyder.
Here you go.
And it's a, oh, hang on a minute. Oh, I got more than one, that's why. It's like, a 5-page letter? And I have no idea what it is, so I can't,
It's a response letter to the natural resources
Okay.
comments.
does anyone need another copy of the response letter? So-
Natural resources.
Rather than take 5 or 10 minutes to read it right now, I mean, I'm happy to accept it. I think we should have a complete record, and I want to be open with taking information from folks. But rather than all of us sit here in silence and read this letter, maybe, Chris, you can give a summary of it, and then anything else you might want to talk about. Do you have a large drawing to put up? What's the matter?
No, I didn't take one for myself.
Oh, here, I had an extra one.
But I
There's
gave it to Gail.
a bunch
Oh.
of those stuff on
Here we go.
So just so we've got the context, this is your response to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we received that, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday of last week, and we had to respond by Thursday, and I missed Caitlin probably by an hour or two on Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening. And so that's why you didn't have it in your packet.
Okay, got it.
We had been waiting for the response for a period.
Okay.
So, Chris, if you wouldn't mind, first of all, introducing yourself, I'll swear you in, and then let's just have a general overview for everybody. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Andy, yes? All right. And you can
So
go.
my name is Chris Snyder, and I'm from Snyder Homes, and here today to walk through the proposed neighborhood on a portion of the Quiniesca property. This neighborhood, as being proposed, has a total of 91 homes. This is a reduction from the original proposal. we do have a total of 26 single-family homes located in the northern portion of the property. We have a total of 38 carriage homes, which are single-family homes, but they're on footprint lots, and the property around the home is maintained by the association. And then we have a total of 27 townhomes located in the southwest corner of the property. This is...
Sorry, the record says 16 in our documentation.
the
16 townhomes.
So the,
That-
Get a reconsideration review.
The background.
Which thing, though?
Yeah, but that's the background for the March one.
That's the old background.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
don't look at the March one.
okay.
so we are currently at sketch plan. This is probably, I don't know, the third or fourth probably fourth presentation that we've had for the neighborhood. And I think we'd like to state that we've been very focused from the reconsideration and recommendations from the DRB and trying to address some of the neighbors' concerns associated with the proposed neighborhood. And so those have been taken into account into this current design. Since the original sketch plan, we have completed a tree survey of the parcel. We've completed a wildlife survey. And we have met with the town staff a couple of times, and we have also reviewed this with the Natural Resources Committee. Actually, the night of the last hearing, we went into the Natural Resources Committee and did a presentation that evening. As I mentioned before, we did receive comments on Monday or Tuesday of last week, and then we have responded accordingly. So that's a general overview of kind of where we're at. There were several comments from the Natural Resources Committee, and I'd be more than willing to walk through my letter if that's a appropriate direction you'd like us to go in.
Sure.
Or if there's other questions that I could answer at this time.
Well, no, why don't you go ahead and go through that, and then if people have questions, we'll hold them until the end.
Okay, so there's some comments and questions about the Monroe Brook and the stormwater management. It is our intention that the stormwater system that will be designed for the neighborhood is a 100-year design, which is above and beyond the requirement as proposed by the town of Shelburne. This is a 100-year storm, has 5.2 inches of precipitation, and I'm not sure over what period of time, over 24 hours. So that's a substantial storm, 5.2 inches. So if you can imagine, the design of the stormwater system is going to be important, and we have not undertaken that design yet, but we know approximately of the areas that the stormwater detention will be located. It's important to note that right now there is no stormwater system that's currently managing the open space or the golf course property at all. So this is substantially different than what is there today. The pond, the existing pond that is on the property, is not a stormwater retainage area. It is basically water flows into it and water flows out of it. So as soon as it rains, it goes in, and then it flows out and goes to the adjacent properties. So those are, I will say, a 100-year storm. From my perspective, I'm not an engineer, is something that we don't normally try to achieve. So this is far surpasses what I'm doing in other neighborhoods and other places around here. So a 100-year storm is a big, this is substantial investment in engineering and expense associated with that particular pond. We will be creating new impervious surfaces, and that will, but the stormwater system will be dependent upon the impervious surfaces and the components associated with that. So roofs, driveways,
roadways, all of those pieces. So we are going to be including and have to include all of that to go through the state of Vermont permitting process. The next piece is we wanted to comment on is blasting rock excavation. There was a couple of questions that came up at the last DRB meeting about, you know, how do we know your blasting isn't going to impact our home? And so, as I mentioned at the last hearing, we do pre-blast surveys on all adjacent homes within a certain distance. And I believe it's 500 feet or 250 to 500 feet away from the actual blasting location, and that the blasting company would be have the insurance and complete inspections of the homes prior to any blasting, so that if there is damage associated with it, there is insurance coverage for that. I can tell you that we have blasted a lot closer to existing homes, and as long as we manage and they manage accordingly, that we should not have any damage. The other question that came up about blasting is that the water could potentially then get into the neighboring properties. The reality is we're going to create a tub, a giant tub. When we blast, we create those tubs, and the water is going to flow into that through the gravel and through the stone that's around the pipe and around the foundation of the homes. It will then get drained out of those tubs, piped through and collected into the stormwater system. So that is typical for when we do blasting, and I feel very confident on this property that that is exactly what will happen here as well. Wildlife habitat and natural communities, as our consultant commented, the project parcel does not contain any significant natural communities, rare faunal or botanical features, or deer wintering area. And that's per the consultant that we provided the information to both the Conservation Commission, but also to the DRB. We are willing to include covenants prohibiting any additional cutting or clearing of forested areas, as well as restricting pets from roaming through the open space. That's something that was recommended by both by our consultant, but also by the Conservation Commission. Scenic view sheds and project layout. So just as a comment, the current comprehensive plan does not identify any primary or secondary views on the west side of Spear Street in the vicinity of this project. So it does follow the comprehensive plan in that in this area, the view shed is not negatively impacted or because of of how it lays out on the plan. It is located within the residential zoning district. The purpose of the residential zoning district is to protect and provide for moderate density, pedestrian-friendly residential neighborhoods in areas surrounding the village that are served by municipal sewer to help meet the town's present and future housing needs. So that's a description that comes from the comprehensive plan. Overall, the proposed neighborhood complies with the general standards for planned unit developments, and that it should be noted that the presence of open land or ability to view a parcel from Spear Street does not constitute a scenic viewshed that is afforded by the comprehensive plan or zoning regulations. So still continuing to talk about scenic viewsheds. The Natural Resources requested a layout that more closely models a street layout for the adjoining neighborhood. However, that comment does not acknowledge the fact that the planning rules and regulations have changed since the original neighborhood was designed. So what we're proposing meets the current rules and regulations, and they are different than what was in place when the original, when the adjacent neighborhoods were proposed. So that is a substantial difference, and we do want to make sure that people understand that. The, let's see, other recommendations, you know, we're talking a little bit about the geologist prohibition of cutting trees in the forested areas. I think we've covered a lot of those, that we potentially transfer the ownership of the open space to the town to ensure connectivity. We're certainly open to that request if that's so desired. We've had discussions with the town about that, but sometimes people want, the municipalities want that, and other times that they don't. And I think there was quite a few questions about stormwater, and so we've, again, tried to address a lot of those questions throughout. So that's a little bit of a summary of our letter of, and responses to the Natural Resources Commission.
Anything else to add about your application, Chris? Or do you want Andy to add anything?
Andy, is there anything else you'd like to add at this time?
Okay.
I think at this time, you know, we've, again, we feel very confident about what our design is, and that it does meet a lot of the goals and intentions of the current comprehensive plan.
Any questions from members of the board? I'll start down at Judy's end. No? Jeff?
Not on this, no.
I just had a question whether any soil borings had been done, or if you have any information on the depth of bedrock. And I know that there's, you know, some visible bedrock or ledge. And I was
Ledgy, yeah.
just curious about what the average depths are like.
We haven't done any soil borings yet, but obviously there's ledge outcrops in several areas, and we don't anticipate a very substantial depth of soil cover over the top.
Andy, you gotta have the mic.
So no, we haven't done any soil borings at this point. There are several areas of ledge outcrops on the site or adjacent to it, particularly in the wooded areas, and we don't anticipate that there's a substantial amount of soil cover over that.
Okay.
I think that's sort of been the assumption, is that there would be a fair amount of blasting required in order to, particularly the home foundations.
Yep.
You know, not
Because these
necessarily.
are basements,
Correct.
yeah.
Any questions of the applicant? I don't think so. I have some questions, Chris. I have questions about the amount of trees that would be removed on the north end of the proposed development where the single-family homes are.
So you're talking about in this area here?
Correct.
And are you talking about in the center core, or so the existing, this is an existing tree section, and that would remain in the middle?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
then we actually have a plan. So this is an orthophoto
Got it? Yeah.
of the current area, and as you notice, almost none of the trees other than, is that it? There may be a tree here,
That's about it.
and that's about it. So the existing tree line is essentially going to stay in place.
Anything to add, Andy?
Just to be clear, I mean, you're talking about the perimeter. The areas that are in red here are the areas that are sort of on the fringe that we've highlighted.
Yep.
Just to show the areas of clearing. There's trees within the golf course that would be cut.
Yep.
And included in that, you've got the greens and the fairways that wrap around. So we didn't highlight the area in here because that's sort of an interior treed island that we were really focusing on by highlighting these areas, the wooded area that's on the perimeter that's being cleared in order to accommodate the development footprint.
So I'm confused now.
Sorry.
I thought Chris said you're gonna remove one tree, but I think you're saying you're gonna move a whole bunch.
On the
In that
northern
edge.
boundary
Gotcha.
line.
Yes, yeah.
Right, again,
That's what my
focusing on
question went to.
the perimeter of the development footprint, areas within the golf course that exist now, there'll be additional trees cut in those areas, and I just wanted to make it clear that the red areas on this plan focus on that perimeter area and not the trees within sort
Gotcha.
of the golf course proper.
Understood.
This is just focusing on the perimeter.
Sorry if I made that confusing.
No, I think I did. And so would there be the need for blasting for just about every single foundation? I mean,
There's a lot of grade change in between basically the middle of the neighborhood into the south and southwest. So I wouldn't say that every foundation would need to have blasting. It sort of depends upon the road contours. We haven't designed the road contours, so we don't really know exactly what that's going to be. But I mean, I would assume that there's going to be blasting throughout the neighborhood.
And in particular on the north side, I think that's the north side of your proposal is the area that's closest to existing homes, if I understand the layout correctly. Am I right about that?
Well, there's homes to the west, they're just down below. I
Right.
mean, they would be somewhat affected, maybe not quite as much as the ones that are on the north, but they're pretty close on the
On the west
on
as
the
well?
west side. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty steep grade from
They're-
where you are to down.
They're
where
close
those houses are.
horizontally on that in
Yeah.
that part, but vertically very different.
Yes, that's true.
That's all I have. Anything else? Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to testify or has questions of Mr. Snyder or Andy? Gail, please grab a hold of the mic and.
Hi, Gail Albert.
Swear or affirm that any testimony you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. When you met with us at the Natural Resources Committee after the last presentation here, you had discussed not just the trees along the perimeter, but had indicated that the new road entry on the north side of the development would also remove a lot of the existing trees in that particular section. Is that still the case?
Now you have to give the microphone back to Mr. Snyder. Sorry.
So we had relocated based upon walk that on the property basically back in April. And so we've relocated the northern entrance boundary to go where there's a natural cut already between the trees. So you're noticing that these darker tree lines are the existing trees that are going to be remaining. Does that answer your question?
Sorry, we only have one mic this evening.
Not exactly, because I just was, what is the number of trees, I guess, that will be removed in order to accommodate that northern entry? Or not a specific number, but to what degree?
I would say that out of that entire band, there may be 2 trees where the road will go, based upon the orthophoto that we have here. That could have changed. But
And then I had one other question, and that had to do with your explanation about the drainage and the possible damage and accountability, which was something we had asked about, and I appreciate you addressing that. The way you described the process just now, it sounds like you were talking about damage to homes from the blasting. I think that our concerns, while the neighbors' concerns are certainly about damage to the homes, our concerns also had to do with changes to the watershed and the way the water flowed naturally underground and where it would emerge when it got down to the Shelburne Heights neighborhood or the Boulder Hill neighborhood. And I'm not sure that your answer addressed that. Can you explain that anymore? We talked about the stormwater drainage and how the water flow might be altered, not necessarily to get into somebody's basement, but to affect the actual drainage in the watershed because it is an MS4 watershed.
So the stormwater, when we talk about the stormwater management system, we're really focusing on surface water runoff. Board member Hodgson noted, there's a lot of ledge there. Surface water, some amount of surface water doesn't make its way into the rocks, the cracks and crevices. That's where a lot of people's drinking water supply comes from. It's a very small percentage in terms of the surface water. We're normally focused on managing the surface water here. As Chris alluded to earlier, there will be a comprehensive both surface and groundwater piping collection system. So in addition to managing the runoff from the surface, we've also got under drains, footing drains, subsurface drains throughout the neighborhood that are picking up groundwater that would collect in those blasted areas, whether they're around the foundations or underneath the roadway or in between the piping that runs from the street into the roadway. And so while we're picking up, intercepting some of that groundwater in that subsurface piping, we won't intercept it all. There will still be some going into the groundwater in terms of groundwater recharge. But the amount of surface water that will get injected, if that was the concern, and become groundwater isn't going to be substantially different than it would be now. Again, we're managing the surface water. We're trying to collect it in the stormwater drains, sheet flow, grass swales, a whole suite of things will be used to manage the surface water runoff, as well as those subsurface drains that would manage the water that gets into the ground within the development area and intercept it, make it part of the stormwater collection system and manage it in the ponds and release it into the same drainage ways where the runoff from the golf course is going now.
I didn't understand that to be really Gail's question. I understood that Gail was asking, correct me if I'm wrong, what would happen to the subsurface water due to the blasting? Would you be changing the course of the flow such that you'd be upsetting a sort of a happy environment now with blasting? Is that?
That's probably a better way of explaining it. Thank you.
I mean, in some ways, there are cracks and crevices on the surface that enable that surface water to make its way into groundwater. But the blasting that's taking place for this project and most development projects is relatively shallow. I mean, you've got great depths of ledge, and in general, you know, maybe blasting is occurring up to 10 feet here. You know, I'm kind of picking that number off the top of my head, not that anything's been designed, but a basement foundation, if the full basement was going into the ground, might be 10 feet deep. So when you look at the depth of the ledge that's there now, we're doing more than scratching the surface, but the depth of blasting isn't so substantial that it's substantially interfering with the cracks and crevices that are conveying that groundwater, whether it's intercepted on this particular site or intercepted up gradient and flowing through those cracks and crevices on its way, generally westerly, making its way to the lake.
So as an engineer who's done blasting in the past, you don't have any concerns about changing the manner in which subsurface water flows by virtue of the blasting, since you're only going down 10 feet relative to the amount of ledge that's there in the first instance?
Correct, and that's speaking as an engineer, not as a geologist, but I can say on other projects where we've had blasting and have had concerns with people where they've had drilled wells. We did well tests prior to, and then, you know, anticipated doing them after if needed, if the well yields were substantially decreased or affected, and actually never ended up doing any testing afterward.
Can I ask a related question?
Sure.
So let's start where we're at right now, because you were mentioning it would be no worse than where things are right now, after you start.
In terms of groundwater flow,
Yes, in terms of groundwater flow. But what well, at least what I understood from the last time we met and talked about this, there is substantial concern from residents of Boulder Hill, particularly on the, more toward the southwest side, closer to where Webster Road is, on that, going to, on that, sort of, what would that be? That would be,
sort of on the low end of Holly Lane.
yes,
Yep.
and going down, not just past Boulder Hill into,
On Webster Lane and Stonegate.
yeah, and that concern was that what's already there is creating a problem. So if there was further changing especially to the bedrock that's there, if there's blasting, how would that be mitigated in terms of the already big concern from those lower-ended houses that are experiencing problems?
Well, if I understand their concerns are primarily related to surface water runoff and not groundwater.
Okay,
That's correct. And I've spoken to them since, I have spoken to Mr. Shover since the last meeting and had some discussions. And we narrowed the discussion down to that during heavy rain events, the current scenario, high volume, is when they have water in their yard.
yep, that's
Okay.
a Shelburne problem through and through.
So, but there's 2-3 times a year in which we have that high volume. And that's what the discussion what his concern was. But it's during a rain event, or a substantial runoff event, or rain and runoff at the same time. So that is groundwater, that's surface water, not groundwater.
So would the retention pond be doing anything to help slow that down? Because that's where the retention pond is located. Is that why that is there?
100%
Okay.
why it's there.
I think that's what you said the last time, but that was a while ago, and my brain is just not,
The retention
wanna make
pond will
sure
be
I've got
there
it right.
to slow the movement of water during
Especially surface water.
surface water
Okay.
during storm events.
Okay, I got it.
Again, maybe I'm just not following, but so then if there's if there's increased surface water runoff, will that affect the groundwater in terms of the concerns of the lower, like you mentioned Stonegate and
Boulder Hill.
Boulder Hill, well, further down?
Well, we're going to be collecting the water that gets into the ground in the stormwater collection system and around the houses. So realistically, we're going to be collecting more water than what is being collected now.
Because your stormwater system will be very sophisticated and built for the 100-year storm.
That's correct.
There's concern, I guess, on the committee, on the Natural Resources Committee, that would not be necessarily sufficient, but you're thinking that it's more than sufficient, notwithstanding the fact that you're going to create a lot of impermeable surface with this.
That's correct, but we have to take that that surface into account into our stormwater
Yep.
calculations. So it's a 100-year event, including all of the impervious surface
Thank
in
you.
which we have.
Got it. Understood.
This conversation hasn't included our appreciation for the changes that you have made with respect to the comments we made, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. We still have our concerns, and one of them is that while the designation of a 100-year storm is the designation of a 100-year storm, we're seeing more and more of those kinds of storms now, and so our suggestion was simply that you would go beyond that in order to save time, money, and aggravation, both for yourselves and for the people who live in those homes. And again, my last comment, again, has to do with that, the blasting capacity to change the underground flow. And I would imagine that many of the people who live in the adjoining neighborhoods have taken steps and invested significant money in addressing drainage changes that happen at times like when Pearson Drive was paved, which it hadn't been before. And it changes the water flow after storms. And it's not just during the storm, but often after the storm. And that results in changes to what happens in people's yards. So that was part of the concern that we had expressed.
So when you come in with a stormwater system that's actually got the engineering, right now, we're just talking sort of superficially, because we really won't know until we actually see the engineering, how the roof drains and the underground stormwater system, where's it gonna go, how's it going to affect other neighborhoods, that sort of thing. That's what you're talking about would be addressed at the next phase when some of that engineering is done, because right now it's not done, it's right?
Correct, we're just talking about design concepts,
It's a
design concepts
conceptual
at this point.
discussion.
And I think as we've talked about with the board in the past, we would welcome a third-party review of the stormwater system. So that when we come back before the board, you're not just relying upon our expertise. We've got a third party that the town can choose. I think that'll just alleviate a lot of the potential ambiguity when you're reviewing our plans if you've got somebody else that has reviewed and commented on them. And we've been willing to do that all along, since we met with Chris Robinson.
Okay, so unless there's any more comments or questions from the board, let's start taking evidence from members of the audience. Ms. Supple, I saw you had your hand up, and then the person next to you, so we need to pass the mic along. And probably it would be best if people would come up actually to the stand, just so that we can hear everybody. Thank you, Tony. You're planning on giving testimony, so I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you state your name, please, for the record?
Tony Supple, 239 Pearson Drive. So, two questions. One is, if I can direct it.
And just remember, we have to pass the mic back and forth.
Right. I'm just wondering, Chris, if your company has used the community impact model that the Planning Commission has. That I think we put it into place 2 years ago in collaboration with the Chittenden Regional Planning Commission. And I'm not sure, Dean, what the acronym for that is now, but I believe we spent at least $8,000 and there was significant training. It looks, it takes a look at the impact on the sewer system, the school systems, traffic, that sort of thing. And I just wondered if that model has been used, if you've looked at any of that preliminarily at this point, or at what point you will be doing that.
I'm sorry, Tony, what'd you call it, a community impact?
I know that we referred to it as a community impact model. It's a software system that the Planning Commission has.
Yep.
And I don't know, it was supposed to be utilized for things of this nature, to be able to look at, how will this impact the community? And I'm just wondering at what point that will be done, if it's something that the DRB requires.
I don't believe it's required under the bylaws or subdivisions or any of the rules that govern our decision-making process.
Okay. I
I've
guess I
heard
just
about
want to
it only
remind people
once.
that we have it.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I heard about it
hopefully
once
it's-
at a planning commission meeting, I think, and I heard it was complicated. It's complicated, I guess. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I'd love to test drive
Well, it sounds
it.
like, it sounds like you put the variables in, so you gotta know what the variables are to begin with. And that's gonna require measurements and a variety of ways of quantifying those parameters, those variables that you're putting in. Once they're in, you're actually creating a database that way, then the system, the software will do the analysis, but it can't do it unless it has the
Right.
specific measurements, operational variables that can be measured.
So I guess there is a question pending for Chris. Have you used the community impact model?
That looks like a
No.
no.
Never heard
That
of it.
looked like a no.
I can tell you that what we do is what we have done is we've taken a look at, we understand trip ends in terms of traffic. And we know you can use that as, there's a trip generation book, so we certainly have taken that into account. There's also distances in terms of view line distances, and so we have taken into those items into account. We have school impact letter is been received, so we have. Maybe we haven't done the program, but I think the program probably would tell us that you've got to go and get a letter that says that there's not going to be any impact to the school system, and so we do have that. We have stormwater that we have to design, which I'm sure would probably be part of the model, and there's probably some component that relates, and I don't know, but relates to density. And so we've done thorough review of densities. We've done a tree survey. We've done natural resources survey. All of these things have been done at a very early stage in the neighborhood design process for this property. This is stuff that we don't normally do at sketch plan. Sketch plan is supposed to be a piece of paper or a napkin that you sketch on. As you can see, we're not sketching, we're drawing. And so we are much further along in our sketch process from the design standpoint than we normally would be. So we certainly can, I had not heard of the community impact model, and sounds like not many people are using it right now. And we haven't been advised by the staff over the last 18 months to use it either.
You want to add another question, right?
Yes. I just wanted to follow up on what the point that Gail had brought up about possible damage to the subterranean water flow or change, possibly not damage, as a result of blasting. And I just wondered, with the insurance company coming to assess the properties before the blasting, will that be something that is looked at? In other words, if people start to experience flooding in their basements and so on as a result of the blasting, is this something that the insurance is going to cover?
I don't know how you could answer that.
I don't actually know what the specific insurance policy is for the blasting entity. We certainly can ask them what that includes or doesn't include. What I have been asked to provide in the past was more of damage to the building by the blasting. I haven't been asked about geological changes and how that might affect it, because the reality is we may do it, but there may be some other change that happens somewhere that changes the water flow or the water table, and that might that might affect somebody's basement, but it may not be related to the blasting. So I think it's probably an unknown piece, but I don't know that. I have not been asked that question before. I can pursue it.
Thanks.
I had another question. just thought of for the blasting. So Chris, would the blasting be primarily for the foundations, or would there be other things that would need blasting, like utilities or?
I think at this point, we would assume that is for foundations and also for some of the sewer and stormwater lines associated throughout the neighborhood.
Okay, so Chris, if you could pass the microphone over to the west wall. It looks like everybody's lined up over there, so it's be convenient for folks.
Should I go to the?
No, if you're right there, you just want to pass it.
Gotta be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in
Yes.
connection with your testimony? Can you state your name for the record?
Kate Fournier. I live at 65 Collimer Court. I have a number of questions for the wildlife consultant, and I thought she was going to be phoned in today.
She should be available by phone pursuant to our rules.
And she is.
Okay,
Yeah, I think we told them that last time.
okay,
Do we have a phone?
right
I
here.
have a phone.
Oh. We talked about this.
I have a couple other questions that I.
Well, let's get the wildlife expert on the phone. Her number? It's Ms. Scharf, right?
Yes, I've got it. 802
Mm-hmm.
453 4658.
Should you call her
Uh,
on your phone? If she knows your number, I don't know.
I don't know. I have a speaker.
Hello?
Ms. Scharf?
Yes?
Hi, this is Mary Kehoe calling from the Development Review Board in Shelburne. How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm well, thank you. I was starting to wonder if you would be calling or not.
Well, we are, and I'm glad you're available. There is a participant in the audience who has some questions for you. So,
Okay.
her name is Kate Fournier, and I'm going to ask her to probably approach so that everybody can hear the dialogue and that you can hear her.
Okay.
I'm going to have to ask you to raise your right hand.
Okay.
Probably we should be FaceTiming. Anyway, raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm, Ms. Scharf, to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in connection with any testimony you should give this evening on this application?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience who cannot hear Ms. Scharf? Good. All right. Ms. Fournier is going to ask you some questions. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, so in the memo that you wrote, and also in Chris Snyder's request for reconsideration, in Snyder.
I'm sorry, I can't hear
Right.
Fournier very well.
Yeah. So actually, you can use this mic. You can just put that right there.
You're gonna have to keep the phone close to the
Yep.
mic too.
I'm just a little bit confused on whether or not there is a wildlife corridor, because in the memo that Snyder wrote for reconsideration, I believe it said that based on your evaluation, there was not a corridor, but in your memo, you indicated that there is a corridor, and then in the testimony, you stated that if there was a corridor or something like that, that it wasn't a great corridor.
Yeah, I didn't realize that there were so many different things said, but my feeling is, I'm trying to see if I have a picture. I don't know if they have a picture there, an overview of Shelburne, but that wooded habitat block is been quite. There's a lot of development around it. There's development to the north. I think it's called Juniper Ridge. And then there's a development just directly to the north of the Quiniasca Golf Club. And then there's a development on the west side and on the south side. So my point was that Shelburne doesn't have a lot of woodland, so it may have more import for Shelburne than it would, say, in Lincoln or Starksboro that's more wooded. However, it's been pretty impacted already. And the other thing sight lines in it, so there's not a lot of structure on the forest floor, so that you can really see through very easily, and that's not a great situation for shy species such as bobcat and whatnot. And, you know, that said, it still is a forest. But the other thing about that particular part of that habitat block is if there are animals, and I'm sure there are some at least, if nothing else, deer and rabbits and turkeys, moving from north to south through that woodland, they would be more likely to be farther west. And the reason for that would be because of the development directly to the north of Quiniosca and to the west of Quiniosca and then the south. So the only place they could just sort of squeeze by on the west side of, I'm sorry, I don't know the name of that development that's directly north of the golf course. But anyway, that area, they'd have to squeak by there, which is almost closes it, cuts the entire block in half. And then they would probably head down to the southwest to miss. Does anybody have a map? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're all looking at it. Yep, no, we're good.
Yeah, okay, you're good. So if you look at if you go to the south, so now I'm sort of headed on the west side of the golf course. I would imagine most animals would head further to the west so that they could get between those two other developments, one that comes in from Route 7 and one that comes in from Webster Road. So the part of the woodland that is owned by the golf course is kind of on the side and not in the main part of that, if it is in fact a corridor. Now, I didn't go there in the winter, so I haven't done tracking there, but I would say that particular part of that habitat block is kind of, I don't know, it's sort of off to the side, hanging off on the side, and then there's all this golf course on the east side, so that would be that's a lot of open land for anything to cross from the west to the east, so that doesn't really work either. So, sorry for the confusion, but I guess the point is that if the animals that do travel there probably don't cross through that particular part of those woodlands very much.
Okay, but
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, a little bit, I guess. I think further east of the golf course, there is a very large habitat block. So I was thinking that if there are wildlife species, and we both know that there are, that why wouldn't they cross across what is essentially a park to get to a larger forested area, especially when they're surrounded by so much development?
Are you talking about east to west or west to east?
Yeah, west to east.
There's a
Heading
lot
east.
of field there. That was a very difficult area for woodland species to get through. I think, are you talking about the next habitat block is maybe over by Shelburne Pond?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's a long way for an animal that would be very shy. You know, it's not a problem for foxes or deer or any other animals that are used to being out in the open, but that's a long hike for a bobcat or a fisher out in open land.
Okay, we'll try to make this fast because there's a lot of people sitting here. But
Okay.
I was just wondering if you contacted A&R, you had looked at the A&R atlas, and
Of course,
the habitat
absolutely.
block
Yeah.
is mapped as a low priority. But I also called A&R, and they told me that there is connectivity, which you can see on the aerial, between the habitat block that is west of Quiniosca to the habitat block to the north. And the northern habitat block has higher priority value, and therefore, because it's connected, then the entire block, if you look at it as one big block, would have greater value. And I was wondering if you discussed that with them.
I did not talk with anybody at A&R.
Okay. There was implication that the development of the permanent conversion of 91 units would not really impact wildlife and their habitat. And there was also indication that wildlife would coexist very well with people, and there was an example given of bobcats teaching
I'm sorry, to do what? I missed that.
Which part?
Animals
So
coexisting.
let me give a little feedback here, Kate. If-
Too much?
Yeah, just ask a simple question. Try not to make it into a narrative. Maybe you
Okay.
can break it down.
Okay. Am I correct in understanding that you don't think that the development,
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding anything. It sounds very muffled now.
I think you're
I'm sorry.
covering the
am I correct in understanding that you don't think that the development of 91 units would not impact the wildlife?
I would not say that. That's a pretty large statement. But I guess what I was saying was that it could be minimized by not opening, not cutting much of the, many of the trees down. And for me, the really big thing is dogs. If dogs can be kept out of that area, that would go a long way to not to having no impact whatsoever, not having less impact.
But you're saying that dogs off leash would have a greater impact than the permanent change of a park to 91 units?
Obviously, there is going to be some impact, and I think the town has to decide how much is acceptable and how much isn't. And that area already has a lot of development, so it's not something that I can decide for the town. But I think that housing in and of itself, although that's 91 units, so that's a lot of units, but housing in and of itself is not as disruptive to wildlife as dogs are, because they run around, they leave their scent, they're considered they are a predator animal to just about everything around there. So so that was my statement. I'm not saying it would have no impact. I think that would be, you can't say that. But it would have probably a lot less if there's an agreement not to allow dogs into those woods.
Okay, in the remaining areas where the wooded acreage, 3-point-something acres, is proposed to be cut, I was wondering if there are any shagbark hickories, which is the tree that the threatened species, the federally listed threatened species uses to roost, and if there are any shagbark hickories in those 3 acres.
There might be a couple, but the shagbark hickory is the most valuable to Indiana bass, which are not, their nesting range doesn't come as far north as Shelburne. It stops down around Heinsberg. So the other bat that's endangered, which is the long-eared bat, actually can roost in all kinds of trees, and they don't necessarily need shagbarks, and they don't necessarily need large diameter trees. But I did recommend that if there was going to be cutting of shagbarks, that it happened during the, not during the summer, so there would be no disturbance to any roosting bat, whether it was endangered or not endangered, so that could be a fall or winter activity rather than a summer one.
I think that's it, Ms. Sharp, for Ms. Fournier's questions of you. It is possible, does anybody else on the board have any questions of Ms. Sharp? And I'm going to let you go for the time being. I suppose there's a possibility that other members of the audience may have questions for you, Ms. Sharp, but rather than keep you on the phone indefinitely, I'm going to let you go, but we might call you back. So,
okay, all right.
Don't go away. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a question for Andy, and I missed your question, so this may not make sense. If there were no basements, would blasting be required?
Yes.
Okay. And also, if the 3 acres of remaining forest that's being proposed to be cut were not cut, would that help with some of the surface water flow, since forests are great infiltrators?
Can you indicate the 3.5 acres of forest that are remaining? I'm not clear on what you're talking about.
The red areas on your map, I believe in Tina's memo, she had calculated 3-point-something acres of trees, of woods that would be taken. And I think it's the red.
It's the one on the table, Chris.
Yeah, the one behind Chris.
So you're referring to the portion of the woods that are being cut?
Yep.
Okay. So your question was? would a wooded area have less runoff than a developed area? Yes, it would.
Kate, if you could bring the mic, I think there's. Keeping in mind, folks who are going to testify, keep in mind that if there's going to be a back and forth, for some reason this evening we only have one mic. Usually we have two. I don't know why we only have one this evening, so I apologize for the inconvenience and sort of stilted nature of this. Raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Can you state your name for the record?
My name is Tim Burke. I'm a resident on Pearson Drive in Calmer, down below Calmer
Do you have
Circle.
questions of Chris or Andy?
Actually, no, they're more evidence. I want to submit evidence.
Okay.
So I want to go back to the original denial of the sketch plan. There was a lot of discussion at that time about density. Chris has reduced his density approximately 10%. And I wanted to understand that better, and particularly in the density, when I look at that plan, the density along the Spear Street corridor, which is what I see every day. So I went back using the grand list as being the source of the document, because it was the thing that I could actually figure out the number of housing units and the number of acres within each neighborhood that comprised what I consider the Spear Street corridor. So for example, Pearson Drive, where I live, there are 17 houses on 20.18 acres for an average of one house on 1.88 acres. On Potter Drive, there are 3 houses on 2.6 acres for an average of 0.87. I don't need to bore you. I can give you this sheet after, and Kate can check the math. But the bottom line is in the Shelburne Heights corridor, comprised of Pearson, Potter, Ravine, Logan, Morse Drive, Calmer Court, and Calmer Circle. I believe there are 74 housing units, and
You
there are,
don't have to hold the mic so close.
and
There
there are
we go.
approximately 74 acres. So that is one housing unit on 1 acre. Substantially less dense than what Mr. Snyder is proposing. I went to the north, and there's another neighborhood down there. I believe it's called Westview. Westview has 9 houses on it, and it has 54 acres, so its average relationship between a house and the size of the lot is 6 acres. If you take the two as an average, just being the closest neighborhoods to what's being proposed, that would be 83 units on 128 acres for an average of one house on 1.54 acres. I then went down in the grand list because it's so easy to do. I started at Spear Street at the northern terminus, excluding South Burlington. I did not go through all that math. It's very easy to see, though, as you go down Spear Street on the west side, that the average house sits on well over the 1.54 acres that I just cited as the average of those two neighborhoods. Most of the houses between the South Burlington line all the way to, say, Irish Hill have no density whatsoever that relates to this. So mathematically, that density makes this development look like it's out of character from a density point of view. I'm not here to argue zoning. I know what the zoning says. But the density is not in character. The second point, when I drove the Spear Street corridor again, there's no project like this. This is just not in character. This, I guess, is a question to Chris. Are there townhomes and are there, what do you call those small guys? Carriage homes. Are there any between Shelburne down the Spear Street corridor? I couldn't see anything remotely like that. I don't believe there are.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not
He
really a
needs the
fair
mic
question.
to-
Yeah, I mean, you've researched it, you're asking me to answer on
Well-
the spot, and I can't.
I'm gonna
Strike that.
strike the question.
Strike the question, okay, sorry about that. So, and the final comment was when you look at and Chris had mentioned this, I think he acknowledged that this development, the layout it may be allowed under the current rules, but it does not look like any of the other developments. It's very linear, which is why it has so much impact. You can see at the southern, I believe it's the southern driveway, there's a road that comes in and then runs parallel to Spear Street. I think in the area in front of the clubhouse is what it looks like from here. And that area, having played golf many, many times and walked from the clubhouse across, there's very little grade change in that area. It's basically flat all the way across. And so you're going to end up seeing this interior road and a fair amount of these carriage homes tucked right up against the road. And again, I can't see anything like it. It's not, I can't provide you the evidence. You'd have to get in the car and go down and look at it. But you know it when you see it. It's just nothing like this. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
You're happy to this mathematical calculations if someone would like that.
I think we got the notes on it. We have the oral testimony, so I think that'll be fine. Okay, we have another witness. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give in connection with this proceeding will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And your name, please, sir?
I am Don Rendell. I live on Spinnaker Lane. I'm a member of the Natural Resources Committee, and I'm not the Vermont Gas Don Rendell. Two questions and a suggestion. You made the comment that the surface 100-year collection system will be picking up additional groundwater from current practice. My question is, maybe this needs to be done for the next round, but to Gail's point on the Monroe Brook, this is then additional waters that will be going into the Monroe Brook flow. Will that additional quantity of waters on the surface picked up from the groundwater, will that impact our MS4 issue? So maybe a hydrologist will need to address that in the next round.
Perhaps.
Don't know if you want to.
Why don't you ask your next question, then I'll...
Okay. When you visited us in our meeting last time, we had a very short discussion on the style or the nature or the quality of the buildings that you'll be constructing. We were getting into green community strategies a little bit, and I wondered if you could elaborate on what your thinking would be on that.
Okay. Now we have to do the switch.
All right, thank you for the questions. Let me comment on the homes and the type of homes and product and how we construct. So we do meet the current regulations at all of our homes. We meet Efficiency Vermont certification. So that means that we are above code, and that is a standard that we currently employ in all of our home construction. So that means that they are extremely energy efficient. The other piece is we do right now participate in the National Association of Home Builders green certification for each home, and that is an exhaustive process that we have to go through for each single family home. It's similar to LEED, however, NHB's green certification is more oriented towards single family homes or townhouses, where LEED is predominantly focused on commercial buildings. They do have a small component for residential, but it doesn't relate well to homes. So I think from a green satisfaction and energy efficient satisfaction, I think we're really trying to build homes that are both energy efficient and focus on recycled materials. In terms of water impact on Monroe Brook, I'd let Andy talk about that.
So while there may be groundwater that's intercepted and collected in the stormwater system, in terms of the percentage of the percentage of groundwater, or groundwater as a percentage of surface water, it's a very, very small percentage. We're never designing for groundwater flows, we're designing for the surface water flows, because those are the numbers that are fluctuating. You're looking at those in terms of CFS, where, again, the groundwater you might look at in terms of CFS, but is more aptly probably measured in gallons per minute. So I think the short answer to your question is, will the groundwater collected on the project affect the MS4 status? The answer is no. And again, having the town look at the stormwater management system, as well as a third party look at it, whether it's South Burlington or some other consultant that the town chooses, I think will substantiate that.
And then my other suggestion related to the intersection of the density issue and what was earlier mentioned, viewshed. Viewsheds being an important part of our open space thinking. So when you currently drive, as you're talking about the Spear Street area, it's a nice open green look, and the proposal is, as was mentioned, a lot of new development there. And we would also worry about the potential for development on the other side of Spear Street, again, at some point in the future, so that what we now look at as a lot of green can change into a developed corridor. So what I'm suggesting, if there's a way to move something away from Spear, might give a little more of that openness. For instance, these 3 houses could perhaps be switched into a townhouse and pushed back. Maybe this little group of houses could be squeezed into this space too, and this house might fill into that spot. Just a suggestion.
Thank you for those suggestions. I can tell you that I think I can address a couple of Tim Burke's comments as well. You have zoning regulations and public standard regulations and size of lot regulations and all of these regulations that we have to follow. And the other piece is there was a lot of concern about the impact into the woodland area. And so we had to make a choice. Do you go closer to Spear Street, or do you go more into the woodlands? So what we chose was to go to Spear Street. And that was based on comments from the DRB and also from members of the Conservation Commission and also neighbors. So that was the decision. And the reality is by doing that, we reduced the number of residential homes by over 9. So that's why it is the way it is. We have tried to address a concern of homes fronting along Spear Street as well. So we heard comments that we don't want to see any homes backed up to Spear Street. So what do? We flipped them. And we now have, I'm going to be honest with you, and this is a developer perspective, have an inefficient road construction because I have what we call single loaded road. That's a lot of road at a high costs, more impervious surface, but yet we have homes facing Spear Street. The other thought that we went through, and we went through lots of different iterations, trying to capture some of those comments, is, well, we don't mind having more driveways land onto Spear Street. Well, I can't honestly do that. I'm not willing to have lots of homes enter onto Spear Street. That does not, from a planning mechanism and from a safety point of view, make any sense. So, do I want to build that road that butts up to or goes along the side of Spear Street? No. Do I think that aesthetically and practically and from a safety perspective, I think it's important to face Spear Street and to do what we proposed. If somebody has another idea of how to resolve that problem, I'd be open to those discussions, but this was probably letter P in our redevelopment of, or redesign of the neighborhood. So we started at A, and so we worked for many months on this. So I think that is the reason for the way that majority of the homes in the southeast corner
are positioned. The other piece that I think, I understand, Tim, your comments and appreciate those. However, we're asked to follow zoning in the comprehensive plan across the board. We've been asked to do that. And what we're doing is doing that. And we are following the current rules and regulations that are in place. And that's important. It's important for us to follow those rules. It's important to use those as a designing element. And really, that's what we have done with the overall design of the neighborhood, is we've taken what's codified in the town, which is the comprehensive plan. So it doesn't match the number of acres per homes. It's not proposed to match it. And the town made the decision to change the zoning in this area. So that is what's currently there. I would also like to comment about the eastern side of the property. The eastern side of the property is in a different residential zone. It has a totally different density calculations. As of right now, we're not proposing to change the zoning regulations on the eastern portion. If the town decides that that's what has to happen, then the town will decide that. But it's a town decision. It's not a developer's decision in terms of density.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, sir. You swear affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in connection with any testimony that you should give this evening?
I do.
And your name, please, sir?
Hi, my name is George Mills. I live on Collimer Circle. I appreciate all the work that's been done with natural resources and the forest issues. One consequence of that, however, is that the single-family houses have moved and really impacted all the homes that abut the golf course right now. And I think that's a significant change. And I have a question that I don't know the answer to is, are there more single-family houses in this proposal than the original one, or the same number? I unfortunately couldn't get that open today to know that. Do you know that, Chris?
26, I can tell you in a second.
And while you're looking for that, the other comment is, because they
There's
moved closer,
fewer.
the blasting is going to impact the houses more, I think.
Fewer.
And I think that's important. Huh?
To answer your question, Mr. Mills, there are fewer single-family homes now. There are 26 now proposed, whereas previously there were 31
Okay.
proposed.
So
So
they just
5
moved
fewer.
all behind everybody's house?
So you had a question, and did
So
you?
that was the answer to that one.
Yeah, but didn't you have a second question about blasting? No?
I think it's more of a comment that because it moved closer to the homes, the blasting impacts more. The third comment is about surface water runoff. There's a significant problem in the neighborhood currently. And I realize you're going to do collection of surface water. I don't know whether that's going to negatively impact, believe it or not, the surface water issues that happen on Collimer Circle. And I sure would like to know that if
Might
this
improve
goes
it,
forward.
right? Did you testify?
It may
earlier?
improve it. It may also not allow all the water that flows through the golf course, or that may flow from Collimer to the golf course. It may not go there anymore. It may go through Collimer. I don't know that.
So, George, you're talking about surface water, so what does it look like in Collimer Circle? Is it like after a high-volume impact from a large storm, or is it just not draining and it's just sitting there? Like in the
At
spring?
least in this side, and I think it contributes both from the golf course and also the development, there's a lot
Itself,
of surface
sure.
runoff.
Yeah.
Visibly, you can see it for quite a long time.
Into
So
your neighborhood to the north?
Yes.
So like in the spring, when the water table's really high, is that like standing water?
In some places, a lot of it is flowing, however, just right across the grass.
And it's going west? It's trying to go?
It's going through the storm water system down to the lake now. If
Well,
it gets caught.
it's
in
got to
the
go,
neighborhood.
then
Yeah.
it's got to go west.
Yes, it's going west, I guess. I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. I didn't hear it. you want
I think we addressed
to? I think I've
the,
gotten the answer.
yeah, I mean, I think we changed the layout according to trying to stay out of the woodlands.
I appreciate, excuse me, I appreciate this picture up. I think it really demonstrates how far the houses have moved closer to the neighborhood. And I realize that there's some forest that's been saved.
It's a give and a take, and we have to constantly work through those give and
I
takes.
think it's a big take.
Chris, what would happen if you eliminated, the 7 carriage homes? I'm just trying to figure, I mean, you were talking about how you're building a road that's parallel to Spear Street, which from a developer's point of view is silly. So, I realize there's economics to this for you, obviously. But if you eliminated those 7 carriage homes, couldn't you do sort of a loop of carriage homes in the center there? You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 carriage homes there. I think those are carriage homes in the center. Here, let me just hold this up so you can see. So in the center here, there's this here, right? What would happen if you put another carriage home here and another carriage home here and made a cul-de-sac and got rid of these? And you would save yourself a lot of road, and at the same time, you'd really only be losing 5 carriage homes. I'm looking for sort of a different way to skin the cat. And then you wouldn't have as many homes right on Spear Street there, which some people have been talking about they're not as happy with. And I know it's up to you, I'm just saying.
I mean, I guess I don't understand, there's a question about, okay, you don't want to see the front of homes.
Or the back.
Or the back.
Apparently.
You don't want to see anything.
Right.
So let's be honest. I mean, that's the reality. People just don't want to see extra homes here. So, I mean, that's the reality. And it's unfortunate. It is what it is.
Yep.
The
And
town
I'm
has
not.
zoned this as residential development neighborhood, and that's what we're proposing.
Yeah, I'm just hearing.
For 18 months.
Right, I'm just hearing a couple of different pressure points. You building a road you don't really want to build to accommodate some concerns. And I just was thinking there might be a way to eliminate that large amount of extra parallel road by just eliminating a few buildings and then sort of scoop it around. You know what I'm talking about, Andy?
So that was actually
Oh,
one of
look
the
at
things we
that.
looked at in the A through P iterations.
Okay, yeah.
In arriving at this plan. Right off, when you build a cul-de-sac, unless it's a large vegetated island in the middle of it, a cul-de-sac's about equal to 300 feet of road when you take into account the amount of the impervious surface.
Uh-huh.
Having a cul-de-sac there would result in a home being here, so you're going to be looking right at the back of that, which was
Yep.
one of the things we were trying to avoid by
Avoid, yep.
moving this one a little further away.
Yep.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but having a cul-de-sac there with the amount of impervious area associated with that, I think you could make a pretty good case that may not be as more aesthetically unpleasing than having the road
line.
continue down through there.
Okay.
With the gap here, the thought was, it keeps this home a little bit further away from Spear Street. You've got a gap where you're looking,
Through,
at least you've
yep.
got an opportunity to kind of look down through with the terrain dropping away. And, Spear Street's coming up here. We're envisioning that this road is going to be at a lower elevation than Spear Street. You're certainly going to see it, but the difference in elevation between Spear Street and this street would at least help to screen it visually a little bit, and so that you'd be more focused on the front of those homes to kind of get the effect of the homes facing Spear Street without, unfortunately,
Being
not
right
being
on.
right on Spear Street.
Thank you for that explanation, appreciate that.
I think, the scale of this is also deceiving. Those homes are about 150 feet from Spear Street, the single row. They're quite a ways back.
Distance.
So this is a,
60-foot wide right away.
So but with the buffer.
Yeah, you're.
So we have a.
They're not right on Spear Street.
Buffer, 60-foot road right away, and then the houses.
Okay.
So
It looks like about
130, 150 feet, so plus landscaping.
Yeah.
Well, right, it depends on the choice of landscaping too, because with that area, even though it looks paper thin, that's gonna support some pretty large trees.
Absolutely.
So-
175 feet almost.
Yeah, so I mean, depending on the types of trees that you pick, some of the evergreens that grow fairly quickly, you could have some pretty good screening there.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a question for Andy. Andy, do you envision conveying all the stormwater from the north, the extreme north road, all the way around to your north detention pond?
Yes.
Nice.
You can accomplish that? That's grade-wise? I haven't played golf there in a year and a half, so.
That's still
I'm
pretty
thinking that's
flat.
awfully low over there in the north corner compared to where you're gonna put the detention pond.
You're talking about here,
Yeah.
this is the low spot, it seems to be.
Right.
But I think we've got enough, I mean, we're again talking concepts at this point, but I think we've got enough elevation to get from here, certainly with the road, down to the stormwater detention area.
From where to where? From there?
From
From the
the, certainly
north
from
end.
the street, you know,
Okay.
understanding that the homes here may be built up. You know, I know a number of the Collimer Circle residents here have been concerned about drainage along that property line. And, you know, we had certainly talked about trying to do something along the property line to move that water as opposed to having it sit along that property line now. I'm not sure that we're gonna be taking that, or that there's a need to be taking that runoff along that boundary and put it into the stormwater system. Certainly, the more we can manage in the stormwater system, the better. But I don't think necessarily we'd be looking to take the runoff directly along the property line and redirect it to the stormwater basin. But I think certainly we would definitely be looking to take whatever we're collecting here in the street and at a minimum, the front portion of the lots, and get it into that pond.
So that would be that whole street, all the way back,
Basically from
Right.
my hand.
Okay.
all down to the retention pond.
So I guess my comment would be, I'd like to see it, as you move through the design phase of this, to look at doing some means of conveying this, any water. I mean, you may want to daylight some footing drains, some, foundation drains to the north, and maybe look at some means of conveying the water, intercepting the water that's maybe currently creating a problem for the people in Collimer Circle or like that street, and moving it to the west.
Yes, and I think that's part of our plan. It just may be that runoff, I think we would try not to daylight any footing drains here to the backyard, because we don't want to exacerbate that problem. And, maybe there's a stormwater feature in here where we're intentionally ponding that water, but the water along the back lot line, while we'll improve the drainage situation, may not make it into the pond.
I guess my comment in general is I think there's an opportunity to attenuate the stormwater running from south to north and help the problem, maybe improve the current situation to the neighborhood at the north.
Yes.
With maybe a stormwater feature in the northeast corner of some sort. So.
I have a woman in the back who wants to testify. Wait. Thank you.
Barbara McIntosh, 20 Pearson Drive.
Raise
We
your
have to
right
swear
hand.
you in.
I swear.
Let's get the record
I'll tell
clear.
the truth.
Let me get the record clear. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth in connection with any testimony you may give in connection with this application?
I do.
All right. Your name again, please?
Okay, my name is Barbara McIntosh. Address is 20 Pearson Drive, so I'm at the opposite end of the problem. Not problem, but the issue. And I just had actually a question and then an observation. The question is, do you have any intention to do a geological kind of analysis of the area?
What does that mean?
You said you were looking at surface and groundwater, but, and my observation is, when they put in the sewers, and I don't think they were doing nearly the blasting you're talking about. Yep, they came around and looked at, we had cracks, et cetera, et cetera. They so dramatically changed the water flow. You can come down, visit our house, with the exception of last year. It might have been damp. It's now a swamp. You can see the cattails growing there. And there was a line between our house and property that is now owned by Josh Dean that was dry. It now runs year-round. Now, those were changes that were caused because the ledge changed, the water flow changed. My observation is just, you need, when you're talking about as much blasting as you are, I would not want to be living in Boulder Hill. You know, there's nobody down in our back acre or two.
Wait, this is not a forum for
Okay,
commentary.
I'm sorry.
If
My
you have a question
apologies.
for Mr. Snyder or
Okay.
or evidence to give.
Okay, and it's just the evidence about the blasting that did take place when they put in the sewer line. My apologies.
Thank you. So, do you have a question of Mr. Snyder?
Did they intend to do any basic, really geological analysis of the effects of their blasting? Because earlier he said, no, we weren't going to look at the geology.
Okay. Andy, did you want to answer that question?
So I'm not gonna address this from a geologist's point of view, but when you look at the gas lines or the sewer lines that were put in the Shelburne Heights neighborhood, you've got an existing development that existed with the streets, the homeowners, everybody was used to what was there for a number of decades. And then you come in and construct sewer lines, and those sewer lines are bedded in lots of stone. And so you're introducing throughout the neighborhood, along the streets, some of them run cross-country, but to each home, you're introducing a conduit for water to flow outside of the actual sewer pipe. And in doing that, you're adding a whole stormwater network indirectly that's going to intercept groundwater, whether it's coming from the foundation, because most of the homes, while they may have basements, probably didn't have sewer coming out of the bottom of the basement. They had it coming out partway up. But introducing that sewer collection system within the network, or within the homes, introduced a network sort of as an unintentional consequence, I'm assuming, but a network of stormwater collection and groundwater collection. And these wet areas that are developing that weren't there before are a byproduct of that. The difference between going in and putting in utilities in an existing neighborhood and what's being proposed here is everything's going to be done initially. It's a comprehensive system that includes water, sewer, stormwater, gas, electric, telephone, and cable TV, all being installed initially. And we take measures to avoid having that groundwater that might get intercepted in those stone utility trenches running all the way down through the neighborhood and creating a wet spot where they may surface as groundwater. And those are taken throughout the neighborhood. It's not an uncommon phenomena. It happens regularly. You've got a very porous medium that runs along the conduits, whether they be electrical conduits or sewer pipes that intercepts that groundwater. And the stormwater system that we're proposing here, along with all the rest of the utilities, anticipates and will manage that additional groundwater that's intercepted. And so the utilities that are being constructed in this neighborhood are very different than going back and sort of retrofitting in an existing neighborhood that's been there for many decades. And I think some of the problems that Ms. McIntosh described are those exact problems that are not uncommon when you have that situation, constructing utilities within an existing neighborhood.
After the fact.
After the fact.
I think the question for the abutting neighbors, though, is taking into consideration what you just said, which makes perfect sense, but they're in a worse situation, and all they're concerned about is whatever you do in adding in other avenues for water to go. Is there some sense, or is there some way that you can reassure Boulder Hill and Collimer Circle that it's not going to go make it worse for them, make it worse than it is right now?
I think Andy's saying, yeah, when we put in that infrastructure,
Yeah.
we
Well,
planned for it.
That's what I want him
Yeah.
to say, but I didn't hear it said that quite that way.
So yes, I think there's a number of things that are going to happen. The blasting in one way, because we're creating the bathtub that Chris described around the homes, provides an opportunity to collect that groundwater rather than it being just sitting there and shunt it off,
right.
whether it's surface water or groundwater.
Right.
The intention is to collect that. The intention is to collect and manage the surface water. And by doing the blasting, you're creating that bathtub that, in large effect, contains it within the site, and it has to either go out the footing drain or into the new basement that he's going to be constructed, and we don't want that. That's why these systems are in place to manage the water that gets into those bathtubs that are created when blasting occurs, whether it's blasting for a basement foundation or blasting for a utility trench. It's a very similar situation. You've got that impervious surface around the outside, whether it be the excavation for the utility or the basement foundation, and we need to make sure that we have a conduit, a method for collecting that groundwater, and that is typical of the stormwater management systems and the utility systems that are constructed in a neighborhood like this.
Just one comment to that as well. So we did meet with most of the people that live along Collimer Circle or Collimer Court, and we heard that concern.
Yep.
Water coming off of the golf course property. Well, if you think about if we assume that all of these homes, there's going to be blasting associated with the home, right? So now we've created, other than the distance between the homes, so the envelopes are those 20-foot side setbacks? I can't, if it's 20 feet and 20 feet, so let's call it 40 feet. There's only a 40-foot wide opening right now, per the proposed plan, where, and then we have a wall. Essentially, there's a wall along the back of each one of these homes, which is the ledge wall that will exist after we do the blasting.
Right.
So now, instead of all of this square footage or land going across, we're now reducing that to 40 feet. If it can even penetrate through that 40 feet, which, if it's solid ledge, which we believe it is, then there's not a lot of water going through that ledge. I mean, it's rock. Water doesn't go through rock very well.
So kind of what you're indicating or what you're hinting at is that the water situation could potentially get a lot better because you're going to be taking that water away as opposed to allow it to run down into the neighborhood.
That's correct. We're managing it where right now it's flowing.
Okay.
Okay. Tony, you had another question?
Question, and I did want to make a comment to Chris. Basically, Chris.
No, you can ask questions of Chris, but a comment to Chris is not appropriate. A comment to us
Okay.
may be okay.
Okay. I had a question for the board.
We're not on, you can't ask the board questions. That's not appropriate. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You can ask
I
questions
will.
of Chris.
I will make a comment to the board. Okay. When you rejected the plan the first time, one of the reasons that you gave was because the amount of the density and the amount of units being built would exceed, was 55% of what would be allowed for the next 4 to 5 years for the annual growth. So 110 units per year over measured over a decade on average is what the town plan allows for. And even though the zoning has changed for this part, this residential growth area, the comprehensive town plan does have this measure in place to keep growth in check. And I would just like to ask you to be careful and really measure what has happened and where we are within this decade.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other evidence? Any questions by the board of the applicant or any of the other witnesses? Hearing none?
Wait, good again.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Gail.
Chris, I'm just asking a clarification. When you met with Natural Resources Committee after your last meeting, I thought you had indicated that the distance, and this is in reference to this gentleman's question here, I thought you had indicated to us that the distance between the back of the homes that backed up on the Columnar Circle homes had actually increased from your original plan. Is that the case? Has one of us misheard?
It did not increase. It is closer to Collimer.
Thank you.
Well, if you look at the two plans, some of them are closer and some of them are farther away.
Yeah.
Right. So
It's at the northeast end.
Closer at the northeast.
that's correct.
It's farther away at the
6, 7, 8, and 9.
That's correct.
Would you point out 6, 7, 8, 9, so I understand what you just...
This would be home site 6, 7, 8, 9.
Maybe
Have
not 9, but definitely those 3.
9's probably it's close. But those 3 to 4 homes would have gotten closer to
They
Collimer.
all got closer. Maybe not.
Here's the existing line here
No,
for
they're
the
not.
boundary, or the previous line.
Yeah,
Right.
the red line.
Okay. Hearing no other requests to give testimony and no other questions.
Amy
Oh,
has one
yeah.
thing.
I guess just one,
Keep looking down.
maybe it's a procedural question for the board. Ms. Fournier mentioned, I guess, I'm wondering whether she introduced testimony from Fish and Wildlife, and if the board was going to be giving any weight to that, would the applicant have the opportunity to comment? If the board isn't going to give any
I will ease your
weight?
concern, and I'm going to strike that. I didn't take it as testimony, I took it as a question, and the answer was, I did not contact ANR. So I'm not, the only thing I would regard is the answer to the question and not the question itself.
Okay,
Does that
thank
make
you.
Okay. Looks like we're all done with testimony in this matter, so I will entertain any motions if anyone wishes to make one.
I'll make a motion to close testimony.
We have to go through a couple.
Yeah, we have to go
couple
through,
motion stuff.
yeah, we have to finalize the record, so,
I'll move to finalize the record.
I'll second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None, motion carries.
I would also then move to classify the reconsidered sketch plan as a major subdivision.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None- Any opposed? None, motion carries. And?
Your turn, Jeff.
Make a motion to close testimony.
Nope.
Nope.
we have to-
You guys,
We're not there yet.
All right, what are we doing?
you guys can make a motion to indicate either approval or denial of the decision, or you could go into deliberative
I want to go into
session.
deliberative session.
Okay, so I will second that motion then, and we can, well.
Do we have to close testimony before we do that?
You finalize the
yes.
record.
Yes, we have to finalize the record.
You already did that.
We've
We did
done
that.
Mhm.
All right,
We
so now we
classified
can.
it, and
Yep,
We
we can
what?
close the hearing.
Okay.
Well-
We don't necessarily have to authorize them to prepare a preliminary plan at this point, do we?
I think
no,
we need to deliberate.
No,
people want to deliberate, so after deliberation, we'll issue a decision. So I'll make a second to go into deliberation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So we're going to go into deliberative session off the record on this and issue a decision.
But we still have to close the hearing there.
No, I
The
think,
hearing remains open.
Open.
You're gonna leave it open, so
do a
then do we
written
have to
decision.
continue
Yeah.
it then? Don't we
Well,
have
it
to,
closes at the issuance of a
Decision.
Okay.
decision.
so we leave it open in case we want to have them come back for more testimony after our deliberation?
No, we
And now
closed
during
that.
deliberative session, you can't take any more testimony or evidence.
Right, so Mark is asking, shouldn't
Oh,
we then
sorry.
close the hearing so that we can't take any more evidence?
You finalize the record.
Yeah, so that's the same thing, I think, right?
No,
Unless I'm
No?
severe
I don't
and
believe
say
so.
what's up.
I think so. Dean, you want to chime in on that?
Well, yeah.
If we're gonna continue the hearing to it, certainly you want to know when this is wrapping up.
Right.
Or it's gonna continue after your
Right.
session. That's separate.
Okay, right, okay, so you do have to close the hearing and then enter into deliberative session and, yeah.
Okay, Jeff.
All I want to do is close testimony. at the
Oh.
hearing.
Yeah.
Well, the testimony
same
is
thing?
You're
closed at
closing
the
the
final
same
vote.
thing.
All right.
It's a public hearing.
All right.
So let's back up, and I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. And I think we already know how we would rule on a motion to go into deliberation.
I don't think we
Correct,
have
you
to.
got
Right, we did that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that concludes this portion of our meeting this evening, and all the applications that we have on the agenda for the evening. So we are now in deliberative session.
Can I go to the bathroom?